Today, the kindergarten was closed, so I picked up my daughter and drove her home. As soon as I parked the car in the underground garage, she whispered to me, "Daddy, I discovered Mommy's secret. I'll tell you." She acted so cautiously, like a little adult, that I couldn't help but tease her. "What secret?" I asked. In her sweet, childish voice, she said, "Today, when Mommy bent over, I saw a mouth character on her waist. Why did Mommy write a word on her waist? Is it because it looks nice?" Although my daughter learned to recognize characters early, including simple ones like numbers, I still thought she must have made a mistake. First of all, my wife, Latina, is a tattoo designer. She often uses her own body to test designs, but she's never actually tattooed Chinese characters, mostly just artistic patterns. Secondly, at her age, a child's imagination can be pretty wild, easily mistaking one thing for another. That mouth character might just be a pattern that looks similar. I just smiled and let it go. When my daughter saw I wasn't reacting, she got a bit upset and insisted she hadn't seen it wrong. To appease her, I said, all right. Daddy will check Mommy's waist tonight to see if there's a mouth character, okay?" Only then did she nod in satisfaction. At 7, after preparing 4 dishes, a soup, and some baby food, I fed my daughter, played with her for a while, and put her to bed. Then I started tidying up while waiting for Latina. Around 10, I finally heard a knock on the door and hurried to open it. Latina came in wearing a white silk camisole and high-waisted jeans. When she turned to close the door, her silhouette looked incredibly sexy. I couldn't help but hug her from behind. "Were there a lot of customers today? Tired?" Handing me her toolbox, Latina sighed wearily. "Yeah, exhausting. A few days ago, I had this weird client from Guangdong who wanted a feng shui painting tattooed on his waist. He just wouldn't be satisfied with my designs. I finally told him to find someone else, but he insisted that my shop's location was lucky for him because some fortune teller said it brings prosperity. Latina has high standards when it comes to work. Even when I offer suggestions, she usually dismisses them outright, sometimes even snapping at me. "What do you know? You haven't studied aesthetics or art." So I generally don't get involved. I just let her eat first and think things over later. Once she sat down, I went to the kitchen and quickly stir-fried some greens. While she ate, I massaged her shoulders. After dinner, we cleared the table together. As Latina carried the dishes to the kitchen, her shirt kept riding up, and I caught a glimpse of something resembling the mouth character on her waist. Just as I leaned closer to see more clearly, she accidentally dropped some food onto the floor. I quickly pulled out a few paper towels and handed them to her. As Latina squatted down to clean, her shirt rode up even higher, exposing most of her smooth, pale back. That's when I finally saw a Tay tattoo on her waist. It wasn't a mouth character, though. It was the character Bark. My daughter had only seen half of it. Staring at the horizontally written Bark, I felt a chill down my spine. As an adult, the word bark doesn't just remind me of a sound. I met Latina 3 years ago while traveling. At that time, she was a graduate student at the National School of Fine Arts in Nice, France. Her professor was on vacation in Switzerland, and she needed to take a train to discuss her thesis. The stop was in a German-speaking region where most people didn't speak English or French very well, so she got lost. I happened to be passing by and helped her find her way. The story is simple. I fell in love with her at first sight. After that, I became her loyal companion, renting an apartment near her school, just to be close to her. It's kind of ridiculous when I think about it. I always believed that if I took care of a girl with all my heart and she didn't outright reject me, I could eventually marry her. But how should I put it? Every time I brought up the idea of getting together, Latina seemed to turn into a different person. She would go from being gentle and quiet to uncharacteristically irritable, always saying I was too clingy. Because of that, I went through a period of depression, completely unable to understand how she truly felt about me. Later, my company transferred me back to headquarters. I said goodbye to Latina, and she didn't try to stop me. It wasn't until National Day, after I returned to Beijing, that she called me. She said her mother was urging her to get married. If I was willing, she could marry me right away, I still had feelings for Latina, so I didn't think twice before saying yes. From the moment we got together to the day we got married, it only took a month. After we married, my role was mostly to take care of Latina. Overall, things went smoothly. But after our daughter was born, Latina became bolder. In our married life, she often drove me wild with desire. Eventually, I began to understand her preferences and learned to play along. Afterward, I gently stroked her waist and curiously asked, "Honey, why do you have the word bark tattooed on your waist?" Latina was already half asleep and mumbled, "What bark? Oh, that. It's for that client from Guangdong. He wanted a feng shui design. He's a dog in the Chinese zodiac, and apparently, dogs are only powerful when they bark. So he wanted me to design the feng shui tattoo in the shape of that character. He said some fortune teller mentioned it was part of the Thunderwater Relief hexagram, a technique for breaking bad omens. Look closely. The character actually contains mountains and rivers." Listening to Latina's explanation, I suddenly felt guilty. She worked so hard, dealing with all kinds of demanding clients, and I had doubted her. She had given me a daughter, and now I had a happy family and a stable career. What was there to doubt? With that thought, I held her even tighter. The next morning, I made her favorite caramel pudding, squeezed her toothpaste, and called her to get up. When she finally woke up, I changed into my suit and took my daughter to school. Just as we were leaving the neighborhood, my daughter asked, "Daddy, is that thing on Mommy's waist really a mouth character?" I shook my head. "Of course not. That's Mommy's tattoo design. She's just trying it out before putting it on a client." My daughter listened, frowning a bit. I couldn't help but tease her again. "Is our little princess trying to act all grown up again?" My daughter snorted. "I don't want to be a grown-up. Grown-ups love to lie." I started to realize something was bothering her, so I pulled the car over. "Sweetheart, you never lie, right? Good girls don't lie. If you don't lie, you can be a fairy." At first, she kept her head down, but slowly she looked up, and tears started rolling down her cheeks. My heart ached. I rushed to the back seat and held her in my arms. "Baby, is there something you haven't told Daddy? If you tell Daddy now, you can still be a fairy." She pouted and asked, "Really? I lied yesterday. That mouth character was actually written by a man on Mommy's waist." A man? That eerie sensation crept up my spine once again. I was stunned. The fact that my daughter kept bringing this up meant it was probably true. At her age, she wouldn't have the concept of adult relationships. If she were lying, it would be about things she experienced herself, not detailed scenarios like this. But Latina's explanation seemed reasonable too. Who should I believe? I decided to investigate on my own. After dropping my daughter off at kindergarten, I rented a car and started following Latina. I figured if Latina was hiding something, it would be outside of home. So I chose her workplace as my first point of surveillance. My palms were sweaty the entire time, and I didn't even dare to eat lunch. That nagging voice in the back of my mind kept pounding. "Latina is seeing someone else behind your back." "You're one." Watching the constant flow of clients coming in and out of her shop, I grew more and more anxious. I wanted to storm in right then and there and confront her, but I knew that would be the end of our marriage. Latina hated being questioned. She valued her freedom. I remembered when we were dating. There was a time I called her and asked what she was doing. Latina snapped, "Do you really need to ask? I'm studying. It's the same thing every day." "Aren't you tired of asking? Can't you just give me some personal space? Care about me when you're supposed to, but don't always bother me." I didn't know how to respond. Maybe I loved her too much and wanted to know her every move, completely ignoring her need for space. When I fell silent, Latina shouted, "If you don't know how to care, then just don't." About 3 hours later, around 5, I got out of the car to use the restroom. When I came back, I saw a man in a gray shirt standing at the entrance of Latina's shop. Latina came out, smiling broadly. The man casually wrapped his arm around Latina's shoulder, and they both laughed, looking perfectly harmonious. The scene felt like a stab to my heart. I sucked in a sharp breath, but when I exhaled, it felt like my ribs were breaking. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the man, then stayed in my car, quietly watching their every move. They talked for a bit before Latina went back inside. When she came out again, she was carrying one of her usual shoulder bags. They chatted and laughed as they left together. I forced myself to stay calm, started the car, and followed them, but my hands didn't seem to know where to go. It took me a while to steady myself and get the engine running. By the time I caught up, they had entered a Cantonese-style restaurant nearby and sat by the window. I didn't follow them in. For one, it was a crowded place, and it wouldn't be easy for them to do anything suspicious. For another, I wasn't in the right state of mind to confront them. Do you know that feeling? You work so hard for something, and when you finally have it, you realize it's already been shattered. That was exactly how I felt at that moment. They stayed in the restaurant for 3 hours. I sat there in my car, waiting, barely moving. When they finally came out, I started the engine, blinking back tears. I rubbed my face. But just then, my alarm went off. I suddenly remembered I had to pick up my daughter. I made a quick U-turn and headed for the chess center. My daughter loved chess. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday after school, she would go straight to her math teacher's grandpa's chess center to practice. When I arrived, she was sitting there, pouting and eating a strawberry cake. "Daddy, you came later than Megan's mom. Now I'm the last one to leave," she huffed. I couldn't help but laugh. "Next time, we'll get here before Megan's mom, okay?" She shook her head. "No, I want you to be the first one to pick me up." I picked her up, holding her little cake box, and kissed her cheek. "All right, I promise." After strapping her into the car seat, I couldn't help but pull out my phone. "Sweetie, is this the man who wrote the word on Mommy's waist?" She shook her head. "Nope. No?" That man was clearly so close with Latinahau. Could it not be him? Before I could process it, my daughter raised her voice and said, "That's Fox Uncle. The one who wrote it was Elephant Uncle." I was even more confused. "Fox Uncle? Elephant Uncle? What are you talking about, sweetie? Daddy doesn't understand." She giggled. "Daddy, you're so silly. Isn't it obvious? There are 2 uncles." She suddenly stopped laughing and stared at me. "Daddy, why are your eyes red? Did someone bully you? I'll blow on it, don't be scared." When she leaned over and wrapped her tiny arms around me, I couldn't hold back anymore. I began to cry quietly. My daughter patted my back gently. "Daddy, don't cry. Grandma says grown-ups aren't supposed to cry." I nodded firmly. "Okay, Daddy won't cry." That night, Latina came back even later than usual, around 12:30. I didn't sleep at all. I tossed and turned, and eventually, I grabbed her phone. But unfortunately, I found nothing. No flirty texts, no suspicious calls, no unusual spending. Frustrated, I put it back exactly where I found it. The next morning, as soon as I woke up, a pillow flew at my head. Latina stood by the bed, glaring at me with pure fury. "Luke Dawson, you went through my phone, didn't you?" I said nothing, but my mind raced, wondering how she could have known. Before I could answer, Latina pointed at her phone. "Check the battery usage in the settings." It shows that it was active from 2:30 to 4 in the morning, and the only person next to me during that time was you. So what the hell were you trying to find? Damn, she was careful. At that moment, I couldn't help but admire her sharpness, but something else also surfaced, a deep, unshakable hatred. It rose from the depths of my heart, making me wonder, why did I marry a woman like this? Why? Was it to torture myself? A plan began to form in my mind. I let her scream and rage, and after she finally calmed down, I said, "I'm sorry, honey. You've been coming home late every day, sometimes with scents I've never smelled on you before. I was worried you were seeing someone else, so I wanted to check your phone." Of course, there had been no unfamiliar perfume. I just needed an excuse. Latina scoffed. "Someone else? If I had someone else, I would have divorced you ages ago. There are plenty of men better than you, Luke. Why would I waste my time with you?" Her words were sharp and vicious, but I had expected it. Latina always exploded when challenged. When she finally finished venting, I hugged her tight. "I'm sorry, babe. I shouldn't have doubted you. I know there are plenty of men better than me. I paused and added silently in my heart, but none as foolish. I kept apologizing, promising I would never doubt her again, and only then did she finally cool off. After everything calmed down, I made breakfast as usual. I didn't eat, I just prepared my daughter's things and carried her downstairs. In the car, she nibbled on an egg roll and asked, "Daddy, did you get mad because Mommy did something bad?" I didn't respond right away. I just watched her for a long moment before finally asking, "Sweetie, would you like to live with Daddy forever?" Without hesitation, she replied, "Yes." I almost wanted to laugh. Most kids her age are closer to their mothers, but since she was born, Latina had never even bathed her once. I had always been the one to take care of her, feed her, teach her, and make sure she grew up healthy. Latina said that taking care of her would exhaust her creative energy and affect her designs. Now that I thought about it, it was just plain irresponsible. I took the napkin from her hand and asked gently, "Would you help Daddy do something, sweetie?" My daughter nodded eagerly. "Okay." I kissed her on the forehead. "Daddy's not feeling too well, and I might catch a cold tomorrow. I won't be able to take you to school, so Mommy will take you instead. This is a secret between us, okay? You can't tell anyone, all right?" My daughter thought it over seriously. A secret? "Daddy, are you going to leave Mommy?" I was taken aback. Why would she ask that? My daughter seemed a bit confused, then slowly started explaining. "Last time, Grandma and I were playing with the rocking car outside the community. Grandma asked Mommy to watch me for a bit. Then Elephant Uncle came, and he patted Mommy on the shoulder and said she was bad. Grandma told me not to tell you, said it was a secret, and if I told you, you'd think Mommy is a bad person and would leave her. This morning, Mommy yelled at you, so she's a bad person." Her words were scattered, taking about 5 or 6 minutes to piece together, but each fragment was like a needle pricking my mind, making my head throb. Latina's mother knew, and she even told my daughter to keep it a secret. That was disgusting, absolutely twisted. At that moment, I was actually grateful that Latina had almost no involvement in my daughter's upbringing. She had no idea how well I had raised her, how honest and kind she was. Latina probably thought our daughter was completely oblivious, so she didn't even bother to hide. The sheer thought of it made me feel both contempt and rage. Latina was absolutely unfit to be a mother. As I drove my daughter to kindergarten, my hands were shaking and tears kept welling up uncontrollably. When I watched her bounce happily into her classroom, I hid behind the bushes outside the school and cried like a child. That night, I stood outside in the freezing wind for a long time. The next day, I woke up with a cough and a runny nose. My in-laws were traveling abroad, and her grandparents on my side were too old to help out, so Latina had to take over the task of dropping off and picking up our daughter. I was betting on my 3 years of knowing Latina inside and out, betting that the promise I made yesterday would make her drop her guard. At the same time, I hired a tattoo enthusiast at a high price to work as an apprentice at Latina's studio to keep an eye on her every move. Everything went according to plan. I also went to the little store where my daughter played on the rocking car to retrieve the surveillance footage. When the man's face appeared on the screen, I felt like a fool, because that man was my best man Jason, the so-called Elephant Uncle. Jason was my junior in college. I even sponsored him to study at the National School of Fine Arts in Nice, the same school Latina attended. When I introduced him to Latina, I even joked that it was fate they were both from the same school, just a year apart. At the time, they both said it was an honor. Ha! My head must have been bright green with envy back then. Hatred boiled in my veins. I decided to strike back on 3 fronts. A week later, Latina's patience began to wear thin. That evening, she asked me, "You've been sick for a week now and still haven't recovered. When are you going to pick up our daughter?" She's been sitting in the car babbling about some Paw Patrol show. She's been interrupting my client calls. I wrapped myself in a blanket and replied calmly, "I'll ask her. You can explain to your clients. Spend some time with her. I'm going to sleep upstairs again tonight. I don't want to get you sick." Latina nodded. "Then make me some soup dumplings tomorrow morning." Of course. I continued to be my obedient, accommodating self. I washed my hands, put on a mask, and went to my daughter's room. "Sweetheart, did you want to watch Paw Patrol today?" My daughter nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, but Mommy doesn't understand. She kept using her pink phone to talk to the uncles. I smiled. I'll tell her, okay? Sweetie, what else did Mommy do? My daughter shook her head. She just kept talking on the phone. I nodded. Did she bring her phone with her when she got out of the car? My daughter shook her head again. Nope, she hid it. She mimicked a movement, and I instantly understood where it was hidden. I exhaled slowly. It had been a week. Latina hadn't slipped up once at the studio, but she got careless with our daughter. Late that night, I made a phone call. The next morning, just as I woke up, I heard some noise outside the door. Half an hour later, Latina stormed into the living room, practically screaming, "My car was vandalized, Luke. Wake up!" I got up slowly. My cold was miraculously gone. Latina stood there, lips trembling with rage. I went to the bathroom and grabbed a damp towel. Here, wipe your face. You're scaring our daughter. Look. Latina turned her head. Our daughter stood by the doorway, hugging her bunny toy. She glanced at our daughter, then collapsed onto the floor. Luke, my car was trashed. Everything inside is gone. I asked calmly, what was in it? She replied, a platinum bracelet and the pink phone my employee left in the car yesterday. I remembered the first time Latina got robbed. It was in Florence. She called me, crying, and I told her, don't move. Stay right where you are. I'll send a lawyer over to handle it for you. I couldn't be sure if the local police would be fair, so I always tried to think of every possibility when it came to her safety. She would always say to me afterward, you know, Luke, when you're by my side, I feel safe, like everything will be all right. Now, she was in the same state of distress. I gently stroked her hair and said softly, are you sure it was just a platinum bracelet and an employee's pink phone? Latina nodded vigorously. That was it. In that moment, my heart shattered completely, irreparably. I went to the property management office and checked the surveillance footage. The person who did it was well covered, completely unrecognizable. Latina looked devastated. Is there no way to find out who did it? She asked, her voice cracking. I said, we can find out. Let's call the police. Latina's face instantly paled. She seemed about to say something when her phone rang. She picked it up, listened for a moment, and then her expression changed dramatically. Without another word, she rushed out the door. I watched her leave, not saying a word. She stayed on the phone for about 10 minutes, pacing back and forth outside. When she finally came back, she said, Luke, there's an emergency at the shop. I need to handle it. Let's hold off on calling the police for now, okay? We can do it later. I nodded, keeping my tone light. All right. As she walked away, I called out gently, Latina, why shouldn't we call the police? Latina stopped in her tracks and turned back slowly. I'll explain everything when I get back. Explain? I bet she was just trying to come up with a believable excuse. Shortly after she left, my phone rang. On the other end, a woman's voice, dripping with disdain, said, Mr. Dawson, I'd say we had a successful cooperation. I told you back then, Latina is nothing but trouble. You didn't believe me. Well, now you see. I didn't respond, so she continued, I've sent everything you need to your email. Don't forget our deal. After hanging up, I opened my email. There were dozens of high-definition photos. Latina with the man I now knew as Elephant Uncle, both of them getting into his car, her hand playfully on his shoulder, his hand resting casually on her waist. They looked so natural, like a couple that had been together for years. My hands shook as I scrolled through the photos. One by one, they confirmed what I had been dreading. The timestamps spanned the last 3 months, documenting their meetings, their intimate gestures, their shared meals. I wanted to throw my phone, smash it into 1,000 pieces, but instead I just sat there, staring at the screen, my mind completely blank. I remembered the time I introduced Jason to Latina. They had both smiled so naturally, and I had joked about their shared alma mater. How stupid I was. How blind. All those late nights, she came back tired and exhausted. I thought it was just work. All those phone calls she took in the other room, I thought it was just clients. My chest heaved with every breath. I leaned back, trying to steady myself. I had to be rational. After a while, I stood up, went to the mirror, and looked at my reflection. My eyes were bloodshot, my face pale. I barely recognized the man staring back at me. I splashed some cold water on my face and took a deep breath. I knew what I had to do.